Welcome one and all. This is the ancient journey. On today's journey, Hell's Belle, the Black Widow of Laporte. But before we get started, don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, please give us a like and a share, and please subscribe. And don't forget to turn on those notifications. If there's a story out there you'd like to see us turn into a video, drop it in the comment section down below. Now let's get started. In 1859, tiny Brynhild Storsett breathes her first breaths as she is born in Selbu, Norway. She is the 8th child, born to parents Paul and Berit Storsett. Paul and Berit raised Brynhild in the picturesque village with love and a strong faith in the Lutheran Church. But their little Brynhild will soon become a monster. By the age of 14, she has set her sights on leaving Norway for America. Her sister had already departed years before, and Brynhild is ready to follow in her sister's footsteps. She milks and herds cattle for neighboring farms, hiding away money and planning her departure. In 1881, she finally has enough in her pocket to book her trip, and she is on the next steamship bound for Manhattan, New York. Like many immigrants, Brynhild changes her name or has it changed for her when she arrives. She enters Castle Garden Immigration Center in New York as Brynhild and leaves it as Belle, making her way to Chicago to join her sister Nellie. Belle takes to life in America fairly well. She finds work as a maid, then as a butcher's assistant, and soon Belle finds love. In 1884, just 3 years after arrival in the U.S., she marries Mads Sorensen, a local candy store owner. Mads and Belle have what can only be described as a run of horrific events surround them. The candy store the two owns burns to the ground. So too does their house. 2 babies in their home die from inflammation of their intestines. And in 1890, Mads Sorensen would die of a cerebral hemorrhage, leaving Belle a widow after just 6 years of marriage. But don't you go feeling bad for Belle. As you'll find out soon enough, nothing happens to Belle that she hasn't already planned through to the very last detail. As it turns out, the candy store was heavily insured, as was the marital home of Mads and Belle. In addition, the 2 babies who had died had life insurance policies on them. And Mads, well, he was doubly insured by the oddest of circumstances. He had 2 life insurance policies, one of which was expiring, and one had begun on the very day that he died. Neighbors gossiped about Belle's misfortune, but also couldn't help to wonder about those babies, as no one had ever seen Belle appear to be pregnant. But it's too late for the speculation and the gossip. Belle has cashed in and is now on her way out of Chicago. She takes her insurance money and moves to LaPorte, Indiana, and purchases a pig farm there. Belle is alone for several years until she's lucky enough to once again find love. Belle marries Belle Gunness in 1902. But Belle's bad luck quickly follows. 1 week after their marriage, with Peter out of the house, Peter's daughter dies of unknown causes while under Belle's care. And just 8 months later, Peter would follow his daughter to the grave. He dies of a skull injury when, according to Belle, a meat grinder falls on his head from the shelf above. But don't cry for Belle. Once again, she's able to cash in on a timely insurance policy. Belle has been lucky in finances, but unlucky in love. Apparently, Belle knows just the fix for that. She places a personal ad in Chicago newspapers in 1905. While she leaves some details out, she jots down the essentials, and the ad goes to print. Comely widow who owns large farm in one of the finest districts in LaPorte County, Indiana, desires to make the acquaintance of gentlemen equally well provided, with views of joining fortunes. No replies by letter considered unless sender is willing to follow answer with personal visit. Belle has now baited the hook, and it's not long before she has a suitor tugging on the line. Wisconsin farmhand Henry Gerholt comes calling, visiting the LaPorte farm and enjoying his time there so much, he takes time to write home to family, telling them of how beautiful the farm is, and asking them to mail him some seed potatoes to grow there. It is the last communication the family ever receives from him. When they ask Belle about Henry's whereabouts, she tells him that he must have gone off with some horse traders to Chicago, but she has kept Henry's trunk and overcoat. Just 1 year later, Joe Moe of Minnesota comes tugging on Belle's line. Moe travels to LaPorte, withdraws a large amount of cash from his bank account, and is never heard from again. Oddly, a carpenter who does work on the Gunness farm later tells that while Moe vanished, his trunk remained in the Gunness home, along with several others. Tragedy and Belle by this point aren't just acquaintances, they're best friends. And one night in 1908, the Gunness farmhouse burns to the ground. In the charred ruins, the bodies of a headless woman and 3 children are found. As authorities search through the farm, they find another set of remains, and another, and soon they have found the remains of at least 11 more persons. And soon police in LaPorte are contacted by Asa Helgeline, who is searching for her brother Andrew. Andrew was another suitor who had responded to Belle's personal ad. Asa had found letters between the two after Andrew had disappeared. The letters from Belle were asking him to move to LaPorte, to bring money, and most importantly, to keep the move a secret. But all Asa will ever see of her brother is a bag found in one of the farm's hog pens. It contains her brother's hands, his feet, and his head. In fact, most of the remains discovered on the farm were those found to be dismembered in the same manner, the head removed from the bodies, the arms and legs removed as well. Most of the skulls found showed evidence of blunt force trauma and had lime sprinkled over the remains. When I told you Belle was unlucky in love, it was only partially true. Belle had a hired hand on the Gunness farm, a man named Ray Lamphere. Ray was Belle's on-again, off-again lover, on when no suitors were visiting and off when they were. In 1907, Ray began working for Belle on the farm. When he was in town and had a few under his belt at the local tavern, Ray would brag to anyone who would listen that he was sleeping with Belle. This was met with mild disgust by the tavern goers, as Belle was an unattractive, large woman who frequently wore men's clothing and butchered her own hogs. In 1908, Belle started to have problems with Ray. He was turning out to be a jealous lover. When Ray is introduced to Andrew Helgeline, Ray makes a scene and Belle fires him. She goes as far as to take Ray before the court to deem him insane and a threat, but he walks free. Ray confides to a neighboring farmer that Andrew will bother him no longer. We fixed him for keeps, he tells the farmer. Ray is arrested for the arson of the Gunness home. When he's arrested, he's wearing John Moe's coat and Henry Gerholt's watch. He confesses to the crime, but makes his best attempt to explain why. It was Belle. All along it was Belle. Belle had asked him to burn the farmhouse down. It wasn't Belle's body in the house, he claimed. Belle, knowing that her murders would soon be discovered, decided to fake her death. The doctor who described the autopsy of the body thought to be Belle's testified that the headless body was at least 5 inches shorter and about 50 pounds lighter than Belle was, and there was no explanation offered for where her head went or why it was removed from her body. Sightings of Belle continued long after she was declared dead, and details of her crime continue to horrify to this day. In late 1906, Belle's daughter Jenny goes missing. Her body is found on the Gunness farm. George Anderson from Missouri is one of Belle's other suitors. He awakens to see her leaning over him in his sleep. Her expression scares him enough that he flees the house and never looks back. Ole Budsberg of Wisconsin was last seen alive at the bank in LaPorte in 1907, where he was mortgaging his land for several $1,000s. Budsberg's son later discovered that he was there to visit Belle. Andrew Helgeline withdrew his life savings before disappearing. More names were added to Belle's list as time went on. As it turns out, there were numerous lonely gentlemen from far and wide who answered Belle's too-good-to-be-true personal ad. Whether she faked her death or not is unknown. DNA testing done on her remains at a later date were inconclusive. Ray Lamphere is convicted of arson and dies of tuberculosis in a Michigan City, Indiana prison. After his death, a reverend comes forward with a confession that Ray gave to him before he died. Ray told the reverend that Belle's body count was 42. He insisted the fire was an elaborate hoax meant to allow Belle to escape. In today's money, Belle was worth almost $7 million. As it turns out, the money in almost all of her accounts had been withdrawn just before the fire. Like I said, don't shed a tear for Belle. I told you, nothing happens to Belle that she hasn't already planned through to the very last detail. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.